What's up, guys? Welcome back to Read and React. My name is Logan Campbell, and today we're going to be going over my favorite picks in rounds 9 through 12, the late rounds of your draft. Now, a quick little disclaimer here. These are not guys that you are drafting to play at any point during the season. You're not drafting these guys to, be your RB3 in a pinch or your, flex in a pinch. No. That should be kind of what you were looking at in rounds 7 and 8. Rounds 9 through 12 are really just sleepers and lottery tickets that can hopefully contribute to your team. You're not looking to hit on every one of these picks. If you honestly hit on one, even two is like a miracle. But one guy can really make a difference because he can fill in for an injury, or he can possibly take over your flex or, running back, wide receiver, whatever position it may be. But at this stage in the draft, you're really not drafting these guys with the intention of playing them. So with that said, you're for most of these guys, I'm willing to take them almost a full round early. Most of these guys aren't guys that I'm going to say, only get them if you can get them at a value. I know that that's kind of the case in the first 4 rounds that, you're not really reaching. A lot of times you're waiting for guys to fall into your lap. Maybe you're going a couple picks early but typically you're staying within the round. A lot of these guys, and I'll kind of go through the rounds as a whole and dissect them, but a lot of these guys I'd be willing to reach for almost a full round early because it's guys that I think actually have a chance to contribute to your team that aren't just going to hit their ADP, but actually exceed it in a meaningful way that can contribute and hopefully help you win. And like I said, you're hoping to hit one of these guys. So with that in mind, let's get right into the board. Like I've said in previous videos, I'm going to be using Fantasy Pros real-time ADP. This basically will track the ADP across every platform and then kind of, average it out and give you kind of a rough idea of where guys are going between all platforms. And the later rounds, I would say it matters less what platform you're using because, again, most of these guys are going to be ones that you're kind of reaching for, guys that you're almost like predetermined taking to a certain degree. It's not guys that are necessarily you're going to sit there and, wait around for because you might get them at a value. A lot of these guys you're going to be taking around early just because that's kind of the only way to guarantee that you actually get them, because at this point in the draft, a lot of it comes down to the research, which a lot of these guys that I'm going to mention have been kind of industry picks. There is the occasional guy that'll fall to you, but a lot of the times in these later rounds, that's not really a value because you're, again, drafting purely for breakout. So in this round, I'm just going to skip past, technically it would start with Brandon Aubrey and Houston Texans, but don't draft a kicker or defense. Draft kicker and defense in the last round. That shouldn't need to be said, but I know there's going to be people in your league drafting a defense in the 5th round because they want the best defense. Just wait until the last round. That's the best strategy. And same with kicker. I mean, you're really, at most, you're getting a 2-point bonus, and that's if you're even right about the other round kicker. Again, just stream the position, get it late, whatever. So starting up here at Kyle Monangai, we got Monangai, Kenny Gainwell, Blake Corum, Patrick Mahomes, Stephon Diggs, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Mason, Jordan Addison, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Brock Purdy, Isaiah Likely, Josh Downs, and we'll go Bo Nix and Jake Ferguson, round out kind of that quarterback tight end group. So if we're looking at it here, there's still a lot of really solid players left at this point in your draft in pretty much every position. I mean, you have quarterbacks like Mahomes, Brock Purdy, and Bo Nix, who have all been proven producers. Bo Nix, I especially like. He's going off the board at quarterback 15, and he's finished top 10 the last 2 years, and they went and got Jalen Waddle, and nothing else really changed. But so overall, there's a lot of guys to like in this range. I think that in this range, you're still not feeling gross about a pick. I mean, you're not drafting a guy that you're excited to start per se, but you're not to the point where you're like, I'm taking this pick because I have to. Like some of these guys you are semi-excited about, have some optimism about. So my 2 favorite picks in this round are Quentin Johnston and Jordan Mason going off back-to-back. Quentin Johnston at wide receiver 42, Jordan Mason at running back 38. And honestly, this comes down in this round to who I truly believe has the chance to see a much larger workload than anyone else in this round. So Jordan Mason, who we'll start with, I think him and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt are the 2 guys in this round that you can truly see taking over their backfields. I think the kind of kicker for me with Jordan Mason is that I think the Vikings offense just will be better. Like, Kyler offers a little bit of a rushing threat, but not to the degree of Jaden Daniels. And really, it's just him and Aaron Jones, and especially with Aaron Jones' age, if he gets hurt at all, I think Jordan Mason just has a more proven record of producing. Just overall feel better about him as a player than I do Bill Krosky-Merritt. The Commanders took Bill with a 7th round pick, so they're not overly invested into giving him the work. Jordan Mason we saw do pretty well last year. He was a very efficient running back, broke off some good runs, and I think under the new scheme this year that they've said is really built kind of around his running style, he could be a potential breakout. And if he ends up taking over the backfield, you could have a very solid RB3, possibly RB2 if you have a guy injured or on bye, and I think you're getting him at a really good price here for what he can offer your team. Quentin Johnston, kind of in the same boat, but at wide receiver. I mean, there's a lot I know I've talked about Ladd McConkey before. I really do think Ladd could be a potential breakout, but same with Quentin Johnston. I mean, honestly, a receiver on this Chargers team is going to have a great season, and to me, both guys have a very good case, and I think the value that you're getting out of Quentin Johnston is very good. We saw him produce last year before he got hurt. He was really solid in the first 5 weeks, and that was with Keenan Allen still taking a good amount of the targets. Now they get rid of Keenan Allen, don't really bring anyone else. I mean, Trey Harris, kind of. Njoku, kind of. But no one that you are truly worried about taking over the Bulls' share of the targets. I think if Quentin Johnston is on the field for a majority of snaps, he has a very good chance to at least get to a flex play, if not a wide receiver too. Because like I said, this is the Mike McDaniels offense. We've seen him produce very solid fantasy wide receivers. He produced both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle in the same year. So, there's a lot of reason to think that Quentin Johnston can potentially jump up that tier and be a guy that you're actually playing. The rest of these guys, I feel like you look at them and you need some things to break their way. Kyle Menengai, DeAndre Swift has been just doing really, really well in camp. He's been talked very highly of by the coaching staff, so he needs an injury. Kenny Gainwell, kind of the same thing. Kenny Gainwell has the receiving upside, but I don't really know how much work he's going to get unless Bucky is hurt. He can potentially take over, but to me, going into the year, it seems like they're still riding with Bucky for now. Blake Corum, same thing, but with Kyron. Diggs just is the wide receiver 2, and even if he is the wide receiver 1, I don't think he has, much more than a flex play upside, but he's really going to be the wide receiver 2. Jordan Addison, again, wide receiver 2 on an offense that I don't think Kyler Murray can really produce 2 fantasy wide receivers in a season. And then, the quarterbacks, and, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Mahomes, who I said I like. I do also like Isaiah Likely as a sleeper tight end. But in terms of guys that I think have a ton of upside to really jump up that tier, Quentin Johnston and Jordan Mason are the 2 main candidates. I think Bo Nix and Isaiah Likely are both great guys if you're feeling really good about your bench, or if you, don't have one of these positions yet. I do think this is kind of the last of the quarterbacks and tight ends that you feel decent about. But just if we're ranking it purely on upside, on guys that you can kind of go into your draft really, really targeting, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Mason, because Isaiah Likely and Bo Nix are very situational draft picks where you need to have waited for your quarterback to get Bo Nix. Same with tight end. You need to be one of the last teams in your league to get those positions for these dudes to be in play. And I just really more want to talk about guys who I think will be in play for pretty much every team, which, again, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Mason, love both of them. Both think they have a good chance to really jump up into a startable tier and give you kind of that weekly upside that you're hoping for in this round of your draft. In round 10, there's still a lot of good players, but this is where you kind of start to see it shift to some of the uglier guys. So looking at it here, we start with Jacoby Myers, LA Rams defense, Dallas Goedert, Broncos defense, Mekhi Lemon, Rachaad White, Jaden Reed, Aaron Jones, Dalton Kincaid, Seahawks defense, Jared Goff, Jordan Tyson, Matthew Golden, and then we'll go all the way down to Mark Andrews to account for some of the defenses in there. So if you're looking at it here, again, this is where there's a ton of unknowns about pretty much all of these guys. Myers, who knows if he's wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 3. I'm not even going to talk about any of the defenses. Again, you should be waiting. Dallas Goedert has potential to be the number 2 or as deep as the number 4 or 5 option on his offense. Mekhi Lemon, kind of the same deal. Rachaad White, he's been banged up in camp. Jaden Reed, can he stay on the field? Aaron Jones, just honestly old and more of a receiving role. Kincaid, health issues, and, do you want to wait this long for tight end? Jared Goff, consistent, but doesn't give you a ton of upside. Jordan Tyson, 2 months injury. Matthew Golden, again, ambiguous kind of pass game. And Mark Andrews, who, again, age, and do you want to wait this late for tight end? So I just poked holes in every one of these players. So you may be asking yourself, Do I like any of them? But yeah, because again, you're taking these guys in the 10th round. These are a lot of times like the fourth, possibly fifth guy off your bench. And so, again, you're not drafting these guys thinking, oh, they're going to be starting for my lineup in week 1 or even week 2. They're guys who you're hoping, okay, can they give me a spike week here or there? Can they fill in for an injury? And if you get lucky and one of them ends up being a solid, 2-spot or flex, contributor, then you're in a really, really good spot for the season. But it's just important to keep in mind here, you are not drafting these guys confidently. You're drafting them, honestly, on a wing and a prayer. So the two guys that I love in this round are Jacoby Myers and Matthew Golden, the bookend wide receivers. Myers at wide receiver 45, Golden at wide receiver 49. Jacoby Myers, it's honestly more of a bet on the offense than anything else, and with how late he goes, if you haven't already invested in the Jags offense, I think he's a good shot to take. They gave him a pretty big contract. He's proven to, produce and just be a pretty solid wide receiver overall. It's mainly just a matter of how often is he going to be on the field, what's his route participation like, how many snaps is he seeing, that kind of thing. But again, for a late round flyer, I think he's a guy that you can take and give it a week or two, and if he's not playing, drop him. Like, I think a lot of these guys you may kind of be waiting for something like Mekhi Lemon. If he doesn't have a good week 1 or 2, you're probably holding on to him. Rashad White, you're potentially holding out for a backfield takeover. But I think Jacoby Myers is like one of the perfect picks at this stage if you are really just looking for a all or nothing guy, because again, he's either going to be the wide receiver 2, possibly wide receiver 1 if he's on the field, getting some decent production, possibly giving you flex potential, or he's going to be like the wide receiver 3, possibly wide receiver 4 behind Travis Hunter, depending on how much they use him. And, maybe he's only on the field for 40% of snaps. You can dump him because that's probably not going to change pending an injury. Now, the other guy I like here, Matthew Golden, honestly, it's a pretty similar situation. I think between Golden and Reed, one of these guys is going to be worth the investment. I just think it's Golden because Jaden Reed has proven like year over year that the Packers don't want to put him on the field except in kind of the gadgety role, the slot role, whatever it may be. I think Matthew Golden has a chance to actually play like the majority of the snaps. And alongside Christian Watson, who is more of a deep ball guy, a field stretcher, I think Golden could benefit from a lot of the underneath work, especially while Tucker Kraft is hurt. Once Kraft comes back, I think the Packers' just receiving room is going to get really messy, so that is something to keep in mind. But he's kind of made it sound like it's going to be halfway through the season before he gets to a playable level where he's actually out there like the majority of the time. Like he said that, and that the coaching staff has kind of led him to believe that. So I think Matthew Golden has pretty solid wide receiver 2 potential on the Packers offense. And I could see him even taking over Christian Watson. I mean, we've seen Watson be boomer bust in the past. Like I've mentioned before, the targets are a lot more consolidated here. And Jordan Love is a very solid quarterback. So I just think Matthew Golden, again, similar to Jacoby Myers, is kind of a bet on the offense and the ambiguity of the target distribution, where if he ends up being the second target on that team, the whole year, you're probably going to have a pretty solid wide receiver who could potentially fill in at you for flex. And if he ends up being the wide receiver 1 because Christian Watson is kind of just, being used downfield, he's getting 3 or 4 catches a game, then I think Matthew Golden could be the guy who actually comes into a high volume role, which would be really valuable in this offense. And like I said, all these players have question marks. I think a lot of them I don't even really hate avoiding. It's just, I think these guys are ones that have true upside. And again, I really like the fact that you can draft them and then just drop them if they're not going well, because you're not going to be holding out for something with these guys. Jordan Tyson, if you draft him, obviously you're holding out for 2 months. He's probably sitting in your IR spot, but you're still having to wait. Like Aaron Jones, you're probably not going to drop if he doesn't have, a ton of work in the week 1. You're going to kind of just wait and see and hope that he can get enough receiving work to be valuable. But I think these two both have a ton of upside and will be easy drops at the end of week 2 or 3 if they're not producing, at which point you can replace them with a high quality waiver ad and keep building your team throughout the year. Looking at round 11, it is ugly. I'm not going to lie to you. There is nobody in this round that I am pressing the draft button and pumping my fist about. I mean, these are guys that you're kind of taking, and if one of them pops off, you honestly will be shocked, but you have to draft somebody, so you might as well get somebody that you like. So starting at the top here, we got Dejon Stribling, Casey Concepcion, Xavier Worthy, Deebo Samuel, Cameron Dicker, Jason Myers, Romeo Dobbs, Kaimi Fairbairn, Baker Mayfield, Zach Charbonnet, Khalil Shakir, Kyler Murray, Eagles defense, Woody Marks, and we'll end it at Chris Rodriguez, again, to account for the defenses and kickers. Now, there's some fun names in here. I'm not going to lie to you, but of this whole round, realistically, there's only probably 4 guys that I would even consider drafting. And honestly, picking 2 guys that I had to recommend drafting from this round was tough because it's all ugly. It's pretty horrendous. So the 4 guys that I would kind of be okay with drafting are some of these ones at the top of the round: Stribling, Concepcion, Worthy, and Debo. I don't hate the Woody Marks pick. I don't hate the Crod pick, Chris Rodriguez pick. But again, like, if Woody Marks takes over the Texans' backfield, whoopee. We saw what he did with that last year, and it was like average at best. Chris Rodriguez, again, I don't see him fully taking over the backfield. If anything, he can maybe work himself into more of a work share, but just not a ton of upside there. These 4 receivers at the top, I think, are kind of guys that are in very ambiguous situations that have potential to, maybe outperform their ADP and get to the point where you can at least have them as like a 4th option. I mean, a lot of these guys, a flex play is asking for a little much, but the 2 guys that I like the most in this range are Dejon Stribling and Xavier Worthy. Stribling, I mean, I don't think we need to talk too much about. This dude's ADP is probably still going to go up, if I'm being honest. I wouldn't be shocked if he's going in a single-digit round before, the season's over, or before the preseason's over. I mean, he's just lit it up in the preseason. I mean, I think he had like 4 catches with the ones in their preseason game. Clearly has chemistry, and with the current state of their receiving core, he's slated to have a ton of work. I mean, you have an aging Mike Evans. They went and got Debo, who, again, I said I don't hate. That's mainly because he's going back to a familiar system and there's just nobody else. But Dejon Stribling, to me, like, they spent the draft capital on. He had pretty good metrics. And he went at like the beginning of the 2nd round. So he has the draft capital to where if he does start to do something later in the year, you're not totally surprised. Like, he's not like a 6th rounder where it really comes out of nowhere. But I just think with him, like, you're kind of betting on the Mike Evans, is going to get hurt or be weak throughout the year. And I mean, if it's not Mike Evans, I do think it's Dejon Stribling. And I think even with Mike Evans, it might be Dejon Stribling because, again, he's popped off in the preseason. He's young. He's a freak athlete. And to me, if you're the 49ers, like, that's what you need. You don't need a decrepit Debo Samuel running 3 end-arounds and 2 screens for you a game. Dejon Stribling is the guy who I think truly has, like, potential flex upside among these guys. And Xavier Worthy, honestly, it's more of a bet on the Chiefs' offense and the fact that we've seen Worthy produce. And if Rashee Rice either misses time or just isn't what they're looking for this year, I do think Worthy has kind of earned the vote of confidence from the coaching staff to where he's worth the dart throw. I mean, maybe his work gets taken. Maybe Cyrus Allen is the wide receiver too. But if that's the case, you just drop Worthy. I just think, betting on the Chiefs offense is something that we really like to do. And at this price, I mean, he's basically free. You're getting him as like your 2nd or 3rd to last pick. And it's a guy that I think has the potential to actually do something. Again, he has Patrick Mahomes, who we've seen produce offensive assets time over time. He's a very good athlete. He's very quick. He kind of fits what I think they want to do schematically. And we saw him produce in his rookie season and even a little bit last year. Last year, he just got hurt right off the rip after Travis Kelce shoulder checked him because his wife said she was excited about the Xavier Worthy pick. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I mean, Travis and Taylor were on like the New Heights podcast the week, like 2 weeks before the season, and Taylor Swift was saying how she was so excited about the Xavier Worthy pick, and then on like the 3rd play, Xavier Worthy basically gets shoulder checked by Travis Kelce. So ironic timing. I don't think it was intentional, but it is just really, really funny to look at. But I just think like this guy's going into his 3rd year. We see breakouts happen. I think that he's a guy that, just gives you some potential and you've seen produce at a different time, which is really hard to find at this point. Again, a lot of rookies, a lot of old guys that we haven't seen produce at high quality numbers. And he, I think, has produced some decent games, in stretches over his career that you can hope, for some of that to come back. Concepcion, the only reason I don't like him as much as Stribling or Worthy is, again, just the rookiness and the Browns offense. I mean, I don't know that the Browns are going to have a single startable fantasy asset, maybe Quinshon Judkins and maybe Harold Fannin, but like I'm not confident in the Browns producing a high-quality fantasy receiver. So with Concepcion, that's like my main concern. I could see him being like a late, end of season, like last 6 weeks, kind of like what we saw with Christian Watson his rookie year, where the last 5 or 6 weeks he ends up doing really well and kind of coming into his own. But I think Concepcion's a guy that you can end up just picking up off the waiver wire when he gets dropped after week 6 because he's had 8 targets and 3 catches in like half his games. Like I see that as a very realistic situation. So yeah, and other than that, I mean, this round, ton of kickers, which I think is just stupid, and then a lot of guys that I think are pretty much floor plays, which you don't want to take the 11th round floor play because whoopee, you get Khalil Shakir at wide receiver 55 and he finishes wide receiver, 48. Do you know what that does for your team? Absolutely nothing. You have a wide receiver 4 who probably never even saw the starting lineup. You might as well get the guys who have a chance at starting, which I think Stribling and Xavier Worthy have the most, opportunity and highest chance of these guys. And with Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield, it's really a case of in most leagues, like your quarterback pool shouldn't run this deep. Like you shouldn't need to take a starting quarterback at this point. And I just wouldn't draft a backup at this point in the draft. So that's round 11. I mean, again, it gets really ugly really quick. And hopping into the last round of your draft, round 12, well, maybe not the last round of your draft, but honestly, there are leagues where you guys probably aren't even going to see some of these guys go off the board. So these are the really deep cuts. And I mean, if you want to talk about a dart throw, like you're 100 yards back and you're just slinging that thing and praying it even hits the board. I mean, if any of these guys are on your bench after week 2, that's a win, honestly. So starting at the top here, we got Rashid Shaheed, Tyrone Tracy, Jalen Coker, Tyjae Spears, Tyler Algier, Jordan Love, Alvin Kamara, Tyler Shuck, Cam Little, Steelers and Patriots defense, whatever, Pacheco, Juwan Johnson, and we'll end at Hunter Henry because after that it's just more defenses and another deep tight end. So again, looking at it here, it's pretty rough. I mean, you got receivers that you don't even know if they're going to be seeing more than 3 targets a game. You've got RB2s who have very ambiguous roles and who really knows what they're going to be playing. But there is, I think, some fringe upside for some of these guys. So the 2 that I really like in this round are Rashid Shaheed and Jalen Coker, both wide receiver 2s on offenses that we don't project to be super elite passing offenses. So Rashid Shaheed on the Seahawks, we don't project them to be a super high volume offense. Jackson Smith and Jigba definitely projects to get the majority of the work. But I mean, Rashid Shaheed, I think, has shown that he can have some good games. He can be a vertical threat. And coming into the second year in the system, they went out and got him too, which does always make me feel better. You always like to follow the money and find the guys that a coaching staff really goes after and targets versus the guys they inherit. And he was one of those guys. And I think, if something happens to Jackson Smith and Jigba, or if they pass a little bit more, I think Rashid Shaheed could have kind of a miniature JMO-esque year where, obviously not to the same degree because JMO was like a top 15 wide receiver the last 2 years, but I think Shaheed could be the guy who, you see have 5 targets, but with 4 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown. I think he has that potential, but there's just going to be some really bad weeks. But in this round, there's not going to be a whole lot of guys that can give you those spike weeks at all. So I don't hate, Rashid Shaheed. I think getting a wide receiver 2 on a Seahawks offense that we do think is still going to be pretty good. I mean, they won the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. I think he's worth the investment. And the same kind of goes with Jalen Coker. The Panthers offense, we project to be middle of the road at best. I mean, they made the playoffs last year. They won their division, which means they're going to have a much tougher schedule. And I think with Jalen Coker, you're kind of almost looking the opposite of Rashid Shaheed, where it's a matter of if he can have some of the easy underneath work, whereas Ted McMillan will probably be stretching the field a little bit more, being more of the big body target that they go to. But I think if Jalen Coker can, get some of the easy work, turn into like a high volume, kind of like Wan'Dale Robinson guy, I think he has potential to, maybe give you a flex week if you need it. If you have a guy injured or during a bye week hell kind of week, I think he has, some startable potential there. And just to go through the rest of the guys in this round, I mean, Spears just can't seem to stay healthy. And, is he going to have anything besides the receiving role? I love this guy. He won me a dynasty championship like 2 years ago because he went ballistic for 3 weeks and never again. But he just, you don't project him to take over the backfield without a Tony Pollard injury. Tyler Algier, kind of the same thing. He projects more to be a thorn in Jeremiah Love's side. Jordan Love, again, none of the quarterbacks you should be taking in this round. Same with tight end. You should be done with quarterback and tight end at this point in your draft. Kamara is hurt, which just doesn't project well, and they got Travis Etienne Jr. Just overall don't love the situation with Kamara mostly because of the injury. Pacheco is intriguing. I think if you are looking for a running back in this round, he's probably the guy I'm most likely to draft because he's on a very good offense. If he can somehow get the David Montgomery role, he could be a pretty solid, running back too if you need on a really rough week. But other than that, I mean, it's a lot of defenses, kickers, and tight ends that just shouldn't be drafted. I mean, of the guys I went over, only 8 of the 12 are guys that I think even should be drafted in this round unless you're to the point where you need to be taking a kicker in defense. But overall, I mean, again, like I said, you're blindfolded, hands tied behind your back, and you have to throw the dart at the board at somebody. And I think Coker and Shaheed both give you at least some like spike week upside. And again, pretty much all the guys in this round, if they're not doing something by week 2, maybe even at the end of week 1, if it's really bad, you're dropping them. And so keep that in mind. I mean, if you hit on a guy like this, like, more power to you. But these are guys that you're looking for to maybe get up to like running back or wide receiver 4 production by like week 2 or 3. And that closes out the late rounds of your draft. Again, rounds 9 and 10, there's still some guys that can potentially have some flex upside, but once you get into rounds 11 and 12, you're really just sending up the prayers on pretty much every pick. But hey, you got to pick somebody, you got to fill the roster, and it's important to still try to find a guy that you like in every round who you at least have the most fringe amount of hope for. So just to recap, in round 9, we talked about Jordan Mason and Quentin Johnston, who I think both have a very good chance to have kind of a actual role in their offense that project to be pretty solid. Round 10, Matthew Golden and Jacoby Myers, kind of the same thing, an ambiguous receiving room that they have the potential to be the second or even the first option in. Round 11 is where it gets really ugly. We had Xavier Worthy and Dejon Stribling, who are both guys that you're really just preying on. I mean, Stribling, I think, has a true case that you can see him being startable. Worthy, it's just a bet on the offense and the fact that he's produced before, which isn't what you can say about a lot of the guys in round 11. In round 12, we had Rashid Shaheed and Jalen Coker, who are both wide receiver 2 bets on poor offenses that you're hoping can give you some spike weeks. And with that rounds out rounds 1 through 12. We went through pretty much every round, going over the guys that I like the most in each round. Again, I'm not telling you who to draft. I'm just trying to give you some knowledge so that you can go into your draft the most prepared that you can and hopefully win you that championship. All of these guys are going to go at different places in your draft, and a lot of that will depend on the draft board. So make sure you know your draft board, because in the end, that's what's going to determine a lot of these outcomes. And just make sure you've done your research and can feel confident going into your draft. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.